Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is said to have many different saga-wide implications as well as revelations in this film that'll change how we view the past 8 Star Wars movies by director J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. This is Mike Zero. If you guys are new to the channel, do make sure to subscribe to see future Star Wars content. So, one aspect of Episode 9 that a lot of people are really excited about is, of course, how George Lucas was involved with, of course, the filmmaking of this movie, the editing, and exactly how some of the scenes were to be done on the big screen. And I think that's one of the big reasons as to why not only myself, I am really, excited to see this movie, and why I'm really optimistic about the film and exactly how it's going to play out. But also a lot of fans around the world are still crossing their fingers that J.J. Abrams himself is going to be able to knock this movie out of the park and mark it down as the best film of the sequel trilogy. Now, these past couple of weeks or so, we've been learning a whole lot more about this movie, and when it all comes down to one of the set leaks and one of the plans by Disney, Lucasfilm, JJ, and crew, this is where it all begins to get very exciting for Episode 9. Now, as you all know, George Lucas is connected to this movie on multiple fronts, and what's really intriguing is that it's described that during the months of November and December of 2018, during the rewrites of the film between both Abrams and Terrio, it's explained that this is when George Lucas was brought on board for support to handle parts and elements of the story that would remedy the plot. It said that George was involved in many of the changes of the ending of the film, and that originally the ending of The Rise of Skywalker didn't include too much of Luke, where that was changed by George Lucas in order to focus on the Skywalker family. It's described that George had also suggested to Abrams of creating an emotional moment in between both, of course, characters of Luke Skywalker and Leia that was eventually written into the story for the final scenes of the third act of the film. It's implied that Leia witnesses Luke Skywalker as a Force ghost at some point in time in the movie. Additionally, it's described that George also handled some changes for the ending surrounding characters Rey and Kylo Ren, and where they would end up during the final frames of the film. George even had discussions with John Williams in order to create a dedicated theme for one of the legacy characters for the ending sequence that is said to capture the Star Wars magic. So I want to go over a couple of parts about this. Now, like I say, George Lucas being connected to this movie is a big role as to why I am really looking forward to Episode 9. It's not just that, of course, it's about what they are going to do with the character of Luke and the new villain, as well as Palpatine's role and where Kylo Ren and Rey are going to end up during the third act of Episode 9. So what's really interesting is that originally Luke Skywalker was not going to be a big part of the ending of Episode 9, which honestly, guys, in my opinion, would have been a big letdown, not just by myself, but I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of you guys out there would agree that if Luke was not a big part of the ending of Episode 9, a lot of fans would have really felt let down. And that's exactly what George Lucas changed during many of the rewrites during the months of November and December of course, 2018. Now, the fact that George was attached to this film and how he also handled certain elements of the Mandalorian TV series, which is dropping, by the way, this fall of 2019, just before the release of The Rise of Skywalker, I'm not quite sure, if, George Lucas wanted to do this or if he felt like he needed to do this, right? It's really hard to tell exactly what sparked George Lucas to come back. Now, we do know that Disney and Lucasfilm branched out to George and they asked for him to come back, and he did, to a certain extent, right? It's not like he's the main director or anything like that, but he did partake in a lot of scenes and sequences that were actually not going to be a part of the movie that are now a part of the film, and some adjustments, here and there, and kind of tweaking certain elements of the plot of the story from start to finish of the film, which is great. So George Lucas, in my opinion, like I have always expressed, this is absolutely an act of desperation on Disney and Lucasfilm's part. If it wasn't an act of desperation, they would have had George from the very start of the sequel trilogy, in my point of view. So with that being said, like I say, George Lucas, he is the creator of everything Star Wars. I mean, we gotta lend the man credit. At the end of the day, if it weren't for George Lucas, we wouldn't have the Star Wars franchise at all, period. We wouldn't have the originals, we wouldn't have the prequels, and even with that being said, we wouldn't have anything else like related to the Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels, whatever have you. it's a big part in history. It really is, in pop culture history. And if it weren't for George Lucas, sci-fi films may very well have been very different, because a lot of films were very heavily inspired by George. So with that being said, what I like about Episode 9 is that Disney and Lucasfilm at least came through and they decided to have George back on board in order to help J.J. Abrams and Chris in order to really kind of adjust the ending of Episode 9. Even Daisy Ridley admitted about this, that there were changes to the ending of Episode 9 as we went over just yesterday, that there were shifts during the fall of 2018, which lines directly up with this, and now that George was involved in all of that makes me even all the more excited. Anyways guys, drop a comment below, let me know what you think about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to moon, we hear them moans again.